individuals and the government.
We are boosting of GDP going up, but the poverty is increasing. That the standards of living of Ugandans are going down every day.
I know that kind of thing. So he's actually going to give an update, accountability of what he has been able to do in this financial year, and also in this term of the 5-year term.
The president further highlighted a number of security measures to build law enforcement agencies' intelligence gathering capacity.
Urban terrorism and crime will be defeated just as we defeated the rural terrorists.
Now MPs want the president to explain how the installation of CCTV cameras is helping in fighting crime.
So I'll wish that he talks a lot about the issue of gunmen who are not really soldiers and who are not really in the prisons, who are not in the army, who are moving around, shooting people and killing them. And cases in point here are the recent robberies in Nansana.
It's impossible to see a world where you don't have bad people. But I think the capacity we are building is that we should be in position to know who these bad people are, most of them to be exposed and probably arrested before they commit these crimes.
As promised, the government has fast-tracked the revival of Uganda Airlines with 2 Bombardier aircrafts already procured from Canada. However, his efforts to construct the standard gauge railway remain untenable due to the continued failure to secure funds from China. Herbert Ziwa, NTV at Parliament.
So today is that big day, and of course we'll be streaming live, of course, as the president talks to us this afternoon. In the studios, we are joined by political analyst Mr. Mwambutsia Ndebesa. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you, and good morning, viewers and listeners.
Good morning. Next to him, we're joined by Honorable Stephen Muchitale, Member of Parliament, Bulisa County, and is also an economist. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, NTV viewers. I wish everybody the best of silver celebration of the Bunyoro Mpango. We are celebrating 25 years of our kingdom. Revival.
Congratulations for that. All right, I think we can kick this off. Members of Parliament yesterday gave their expectations, but maybe we can start it off on a personal note. What is key for you today? What would you say that should be the first pointer the president should address this afternoon?
The expectations of the country today are so high, aware that after the last year's State of National Address, which is a precursor to the budget, and this time no longer estimates but actuals, we had other addresses of the president to the country, including on security. I hope this time we shall have time to discuss it in Parliament, because last time there were so many addresses and we didn't debate. But for me, mine is generally a national dialogue beyond what we are now seeing as an iPod dialogue. Dialogue on so many areas. First of all, we have to talk about the curriculum of education. The curriculum of the education system is the public investment in transforming the country. We have to talk about the issues of, the president talked about import substitution, local content. Is it happening? We have to talk about the jobless growth, whereby there is GDP growth, yes, for decades, but we are not transforming when we promised middle income status. We have to talk about the issue of security. We professionalize the army and the police. We can now see the army and the LODs taking over the police. What happened to the police?
Correct.
We talked about industrialization for the last 3 years' budget. Are we industrializing? That is also a very important aspect to talk about. We've been for over a decade doing a lot of roads, and we have done a lot of power. are Ugandans consuming this power, and is it bringing down the competitiveness in this country in terms of the cost of doing business? So generally, this is a national dialogue in broader areas, including the land sector, which we seemingly continue, because to discuss agriculture modernization and commercialization, we must deal with the land factor. So when we talk about cities, let's talk about economic zones.
Okay.
Let's talk about cities as densities and numbers for the markets. Let's talk about the challenges of related, or not just talking about some of. There's a national fiscal plan which we should be talking about, instead of just talking about singular land acquisition, constitutional amendment. So this could also lead to comprehensive constitutional review commission. This will then lead to downstream discussion of other laws. But to discuss just laws without comprehensive constitutional review commission, we may have challenges.
Okay, what's for you, Professor?
First of all, you did ask as to what our expectations, or is my expectation. If you don't mind, I would like to rephrase the question that what ought to be in the State of the Nation address, because my expectation is that he will talk about infrastructure, but I think that's not so important. Not that infrastructure is not important. I'm saying what ought to be addressed in the economy. On the side of economy, I think we need to hear how far the government has gone in moving Uganda to a middle-income country, a MIC. We were promised that Uganda would be middle-income by 2020. A middle-income country is, according to the World Bank, should be having a GDP per capita of around 1,005, or between 1,005 and 1,200 US dollars. Uganda is still at around 700 per capita income, and it has been like that for the last 3 years, almost vacillating between 650 to 700. So what miracle is government going to tell us that we are going to be a middle income country in 2020, in 1 year to come, that is having $1,000 per capita income?
Correct.
Remember, some countries within the region, by the way, have attained that. I mean, Kenya is already a middle-income country, actually upper middle-income country. Its GDP per capita is around 1,900, and its size of the economy is about, I think, almost 2,000. 2,000 US dollars. So we want to know the status around that economy. Politics, I think Uganda is a diverse country. We want to hear, we ought to hear how the government is managing and has continued and is going to manage diversity. Uganda is a diverse country. We want to see how to manage diversity in Uganda, to move away from tear gas politics. We want to see how the political class reaches a minimum consensus away from tear gassing people every time they are going in the field. In education, we want to hear how, for example, the drop is it drop rate?
Yes.
Dropout rate.
Non-completion.
Yeah, non-completion. It is very high. Uganda has got one of the highest in sub-Saharan Africa. We want to see how that one can be addressed. And then when it comes back again to economy, my friend here and others are talking about commercialization of agriculture. I don't know this and that. We need to know that Uganda is basically an agrarian country or agricultural country, but agriculture is a low productivity sector. He's an economist, he knows that. We want to see how the majority of the people in Uganda are moved away from this low productivity sector to the other sectors. People out there may want to know that Uganda contributes only about 22 to 23% to GDP.
Correct.
That's the contribution of agriculture, the ratio
Correct.
to the GDP. And yet, about or more than 75 people, population of Uganda, is employed in agriculture. Now, we want to see a structural change where the majority of the people are moved away from this low productivity area to high productivity areas such as industry and the social services sector.
But Professor, is it a matter of moving them that are in agriculture to other sectors, or pretty much improving agriculture as a sector, commercialization of it thereof? Because we know that we have quite a huge potential as a country in Uganda. We say that actually we boast of amazing climatic conditions. That's one. Our soils are, thanks to the heavens, very fertile as well. We also have conversations that, if agriculture is done right, then actually we'll be the producers of food for other states, in terms of food security and stuff like that. So is it a matter of moving them that are in agriculture to other sectors, or pretty much investing more in agriculture and boosting it as a sector?
Even if we did that, you see, I told you that agriculture is a low productivity sector. There is no country anywhere in the world which is called a developed country whose majority of the population are employed in agriculture. That's one. Two, I think in Uganda what is important is not a question of commercialization or whatever. It should be a question of productivity, increasing productivity, not necessarily production. Production is increasing what you have produced because you have increased on acreage. Uganda's soils are increasingly becoming unproductive. Uganda needs to increase productivity, and therefore we need to improve on our technology of production and the other animal and crop husbandry technologies, not necessarily increasing more and more and more, but also we have to look at agriculture as a low productivity area and move the population from that sector to the other sectors, and therefore concentration, in my opinion, should be on human development, human development capital. That is where the government should take us, and I would like to hear from the President's State of the Nation address how human capital in Uganda is being improved, because that is where to go in the 21st century and beyond, because we are now living in a knowledge economy. We are no longer living in an agrarian economy.
Correct.
Mr. Honorable Muchitale, you are a parent, and I know Professor is as well. And when he was talking, you get a feel that he has an idea of what he expects from the president. And when you hear him talk, you agree, very many Ugandans agree with him. He's talking about agriculture. On the front pages today, here we have Museveni pushes for space technology research with Russia. In the past few months, we have seen factories being opened almost every single week. We have had statements from the president regarding to where the country should be heading. You as a parent, when you ask your child to go to the bathroom to bathe, they go and bathe and come back. Do you feel that I personally feel that we have gotten into a space where the State of the Nation address is something that is happening every single year because it has to happen? You as an MP, your biggest role is conversation, debate, to have national dialogue. Do you feel we are putting the president and the government to enough task from last year's State of the Nation address to this year to really tell us in detail what has happened in between there? Or is the State of the Nation address another platform for him to come and release some political statements and talk to people? Because we haven't had any meetings of him meeting people to sort of agree on what they are going to talk about in this State of the Nation address. It's more of him coming to tell us what he thinks is happening in the country.
I'll complete my quest for national dialogue with the need for a shared vision. The country needs a consensus on the direction we are taking. There has been a debate of how to balance between the investment in infrastructure hardwares and the softwares of the human resource development, including the social services. We have a debate right now which has been going on from some of us for the last 9 years or so, that the debt servicing may become a problem, and you're aware 25% of our budget is servicing debt. Now, if you're servicing debt, it automatically means, you know, by default, that you have challenges in terms of other social services, including the statutory payments like salaries. Now, so there is a trade-off in as far as that is concerned. But remember, the president 3 years ago promised that we're going to have restructuring, rationalization, and mergers. You know, instead of talking about salary enhancement, we first do this. Because why does this country need a dialogue in the direction of restructuring and mergers? There is a lot of parallel competing entities in terms of mandates and processes. And so even if the campaign is looming, we need to have that spine of saying, I think we cannot have this much duplication. We don't have the luxury of this money to spend in all these areas. Can we do what is priority of priorities, as the president has always said? In the bush, they looked for bullets first, not everything. So can we find the money to invest in the human resource, and not just the whole UP and USE? Can we vocationalize the education system and make sure that the curriculum and the skilling does not wait for somebody to first drop out, because they don't even drop out, by the way. Correct. That's why I want to use non-completion. But from the ECD, from early childhood development, through the primary, through, you create a foundation, Professor Ndebesa went through an education system where there was some element of technical drawing, of some woodwork, you know. So we have lost all that. Then we say you first finish a degree, then you go for reskilling. We even recently got a loan to reskill graduates. So these are challenges we are having because the education system needs to be also revised. And for me, I think it's very important that we have a national dialogue to agree. Why are we talking of, here he's making a very important point. In America, it's about 2% engaged in agriculture. But we also have to be very clear. Until we move from agriculture to industry, to manufacturing and services, our population is still stuck in agriculture. So when they are still there, to deal with the poverty, you have to do, the magic bullet remains the skilling. Now that we have land pressure, now that we have decided to have a laissez-faire on the population control, we must then, the only way we can get a demographic dividend from this to a population we don't control is by transforming the peasants from Blisa into plumbers, into carpenter, into the ICT, into the information age. Then they can do away from land. But what is happening currently is an equivalent of a stagnation, because the peasants are not moving away. Those who are taking the land are not productive. They are not using it extensively to employ the other people. Actually, they're just land speculators. So you get a problem that you want to move peasants from the land, but you're not giving them a transition, a demographic transition to move from peasantry. Peasantry basically means using your rudimentary labor on land to earn a living. So but how do you transform? So we need to invest our public spending, working together with the private sector, should be to invest. And this is where the role of the state comes in. The UDC, the industrial policy. How can we make sure? Why am I talking about low content? Why am I talking about import substitution? If Uganda, Parliament, State House, Finance is importing furniture, then where do you get jobs in Uganda? Right. So we need seriously to have an industrial policy. Then it is from agriculture, you do agro-processing, you are creating a value chain. From agro-processing, you do industry. From industry, you go to services.
It's a whole chain.
It's a whole chain.
That falls into each other.
But you cannot carry people from agriculture, throw them where there are no industries.
Professor.
Yeah, but if I could rephrase or follow up on his question, I think to a certain extent he wanted to know what role Parliament plays to ensure that all those things you are talking about are done. What pressure is government putting on the, what pressure is the Parliament, the legislature, putting on the executive to make sure that
to give us enough
accountability and follow up on those things? I think that was part of the question. For example, There is a budget coming next week, and you have already more or less passed it. They passed it, these members of parliament, and they passed it without debating it. But maybe they will debate it later on after it has been presented.
It's not estimate, it is actual.
Yeah.
Before it was a budget estimate, now it's actual.
And you pass it without debating it thoroughly. I think that's the follow-up of his question. For example, let me give an example. UBOS, Uganda Bureau of Statistics, has given us a poverty map in Uganda. And the eastern region is lagging behind the rest of the regions, far behind. Some regions have a poverty levels of 60%, 50%, while others in other regions are about 10, 15%. What is this budget doing in terms of allocating resources to eastern region to address the question? Because it is even a constitutional question. It says that the government should come up with affirmative action to make sure that all regions move on is it on a tandem or at tandem? And moreover, we are signatories of the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, which says leave no one behind. What is Parliament doing to ensure that none is left behind, considering that UBOS has given us statistics of the developments in Uganda, and yet when you look at budgetary allocation, there is no affirmative action done for Eastern Uganda. So maybe the Honorable can tell us what Parliament is doing to put pressure on Uganda to allocate resources according to needs.
I have already said that we need a shared vision. We need consensus.
How do you pressurize to have consensus?
I am saying we need consensus, and I'm saying consensus beyond just Parliament, beyond the ruling government and opposition, and that's why I said I am interested in the national dialogue beyond the iPod, including the academia, including the manufacturers, including the taxpayers themselves. Because why am I saying this? Because I have said that I am an advocate for cities. I moved that motion also in Parliament. But I'm saying there must be economic zones in line with the National Physical Development Plan, with an industrial park. What is that you can do? 3 items you can do in East, like you've successfully done in Southwest, that there is tea, which is perennial, that there is milk, that there is banana, which are successfully done in Western Uganda, that it can also transform the North. And that's why, in line with the SDG, it is important that the other area of dialogue, because in the Constitution, Article 174, A and B, we talk of regional governments and equalization. So the country, under this dialogue we are talking about, must also look at areas where there is stagnation.
The national dialogue should be anchored in law. If it is not anchored in law, it will be taken for granted. Now, what has Parliament done
there is a
to anchor the national dialogue into law so that it is mandatory?
You see, Professor Ndebesa, I don't want you to be, Sivambi, the late Sivambi, may he so rest in peace, he used to talk about practical politics. I come from your background of the theory. I am talking of the practical politics. What is pertaining today? I have said, we as citizens, we don't have a consensus.
I hope we are not subjects.
We don't have a shared vision. And I'm saying we can strive to have a shared vision. Right. And when we do that, we shall agree that some of the areas which are consuming our money could actually be wasteful. And we stop spending in those areas and directing money where it can give.
And how can Parliament help us stop that hemorrhage of
what is the structure of your Parliament as a political scientist?
Okay, Honorable, this is budget week. Actually, it was launched, and we are counting down to, budget day. And Professor has asked quite a critical question. Whenever you're talking of consensus, whenever you're talking of shared vision, pretty much, you are the people who are elected by the citizens to represent their voice in Parliament. Then why was this budget passed without it being debated thoroughly and critically?
I don't want to go into the intricacies of the budget process, the delays from the executive side. You remember we had to do some corrections of what was being brought on the floor. Remember we're getting corrigenda up to a day 2. So basically, the budget process was somehow not given the latitude it should have.
Why not?
And as Parliament, we have registered that complaint of executive trying to deplete our responsibility in terms of appropriation and the whole budget process. But what we need to understand, what is a budget? You are supposed to have a balanced budget in terms of the revenue side and the expenditure side. So the moment you don't have the spine to control the expenditure side, then you have a bottomless pit. So what we need, whether you are in government or opposition, is to agree, is everything in the current budget a priority? Are there things which can wait? Yes, I'm an independent, but coming from the NRM majority. So there is a ruling government who is a manifesto. Government has made these commitments much earlier. When you are talking of borrowing and debt servicing, it also comes with what you call counterpart funding. So beyond just the debt servicing, which is the first call on the budget, you must also find money to support these projects. Otherwise, we'll have more challenges. We are even now going into PPPs, which some of them have come with contingent liabilities. We are borrowing some sort of. These are challenges we need to engage. And if we agree on this, we could say, yes, are we ready? I said, are we ready as citizens to say, can we restructure government? Can we merge some of these authorities? Can we see some of these people go back home? That is, and yet campaign is tomorrow. So these are things we must own as citizens of Uganda without pointing fingers at one side of government. I think as a country, let us not relegate responsibility to just say it is the government, it is the opposition. I think also, my argument has always been that we also need to see evidence-based policy. How has the academia, how have our researchers put in place some of these policies? For example, we are trying to, some kind of think tank, some kind of policy direction, so that we don't just hear pronouncements coming from some corners. Who is engaging at that level? Because when I was still at the university, our lecturers used to do that. Our professors, the late Nsibami, the Mamdan used to engage government policy. I rarely hear that these days. And that's why you can find you have a wrong education curriculum, I looked at the white paper and the Kajubi report on UPE, but the way it was implemented was an alteration. And I'm not surprised we are not getting a return out of UPE and USA. So, Professor, how does academia allow this to continue? I've not seen anybody resigning among the experts.
I want to bring you in on this one. Mr. Muchitale has talked about there's a point where we're talking about convergence, where we're bringing all these ministries, trying to make sure that we are all chasing one goal and not conflicting with each other. We have talked about job creation. We have talked about SGR. We have talked about urban terrorism and bringing it to an end. The one thing that even the people that hate the United States of America they like about it so much is that they seem to have one goal. It doesn't matter who is the president. It doesn't matter which party is in that seat. They seem to have a goal. When Barack Obama was the president, we all knew and we saw it clearly that he knew there was a deficit in jobs in America, and he concentrated on that. Yes, he did other things, but his concentration was right there. When Donald Trump came into that seat, you have clearly seen that that is what their goal is, to improve that. State of the Nation address, every single year, we seem to be having a different goal. We seem to be prioritizing something different every single year. Like I told you, I'm not going to say one morning, but one day, we woke up and SGR was our main focus. Then we decided urban terrorism, of course, after the loss of the AIGP. Then we had Honorable Abiriga. Now we're having all these Nansana robberies and all that. Looks like security is our main focus. We'll wake up another day and our focus is on limiting these rallies and all that, and then we end up with POMA. Does it look like we have a main goal, or is it us reacting to what is happening at that time?
I think broadly you have asked very many questions in one, but broadly how I can look at it, maybe you are asking, is there a strategic goal? Is there strategic thinking in this country? Or for that matter in Africa? Because if you go to the Western world, Europe and America and these other developed countries and China, they have got strategic goals, long-term goals. But it seems in Africa generally, we do not have those long-term goals. Now we have got this goal of
Vision 2040.
Vision 2063, I think, for the whole of Africa, and Africa Uganda 2040. But they seem not to be very clear. I think our goals, as you are rightly put it, are not very clear in terms of strategic thinking, in terms of long-term thinking. That is the challenge that we do have in Africa, in the prioritization, as the Honorable here has just put it. So, whereas people in other regions have got those strategic goals, but the major strategic goal now, as I can see, in the 21st century, is human capital development. Not so much infrastructure, not so much these other things, but human development. How are we addressing human development? Because otherwise, we have stagnated. Uganda really, if we look at it from a macro level, at the level of GDP, we are doing very badly, because the GDP of Uganda is just 27 billion US dollars. And even in region, as I have pointed out, Kenya is almost coming to 200.
Yes.
Tanzania is 55 billion, actually 56. And you can see in the GDP per capita, even Tanzania is almost coming to 1,000. It's 900 something. So at that macro level, Uganda is not doing very well. Among other reasons, it could be that we are having an economy without prioritizing certain sectors and certain strategies, and also foreignization of the economy. Because we can register GDP growth, but it is not in the hands of the people. It is not tangible, because there is a lot of hemorrhage. There is a lot of money going out through financial outflows.
Correct.
For different reasons. So we need to turn around and look at the economic strategy. The challenge, however, which I would want to put to my MP here and the Parliament generally, is, do we have space to have these dialogues? Because these people are passing laws that actually close and shrink the dialogue space. He's challenging that the academia and other civil society think tanks do not give data. I have been meeting Honorable here in Siatini, where I belong, and we have given you statistics. For example, what budgetary allocation goes to trade, what budgetary allocation goes to industry. Industry and trade is a ministry, and it is very critical when it comes to trade and export sector, because we are running an export-led economy. But you look at the percentage allocated to such a sector and vis-a-vis other sectors. So prioritization of sectors. But if Parliament can pass a budget without debating it, how will we prioritize some of those sectors and move forward?
The convergence now is that we need critical thinking. We need to have a shared vision and a national dialogue on some of these things. I don't want to call it a state capture. That during our days at university, call it they used to call it intellectual hypocrisy or mediocrity. How can the country have all these bright people, and NADS will not work? And you spend money 12 years in NADS, in all these things, and there will be no impact, and life continues. How can you continue knowing that UPE is in numerical literacy, but there is no completion, and we are there as a country? So when I'm talking about I'm talking about the political class. The political class is not the elected parliament. It's not like the president and his executive. The political class includes Professor Mwambusia. It includes the taxpayer. Now, if the interest groups cannot articulate their interest and we surrender it, and that's the state capture I'm talking about. So we really need to engage. We have professors who have said if he makes an indicting research to government, he doesn't get the next contract. Professor Nwagawa said that many times. So people have decided to make tailor-made consultancies to government. And I want to emphasize the role of the state. Where the private sector, liberation has been very good. The policy is not cast in concrete, has done some good reforms. We've moved into some areas, but there are areas which can only be kickstarted by the government. And that's why in 2016 we brought back UDC. But UDC is not getting funding. I come from Blissa, where
we're supposed to allocate that
where we are supposed to have 20 billion investment in oil and gas. But I am very worried if we shall get the 40% low content of citizens. So to do that, if the private sector is weak, the state participation becomes an entry point. So the role of the state needs to be reviewed, and that's a policy direction. It's not about being elected an MP. I also don't hear this engagement coming from the opposition. Of course, our opposition has also been in this array. They are trying to get formation. They are yet to engage in policy in terms of, because one would ask, what economic policy does Uganda follow? You may have a problem to answer that question.
Honorable, allow me interject
Yes.
a little bit here. Do you think, when I hear you say all these things, and the professor as well, are we the problem with the people, the Ugandans?
I use the word political class.
Yes. You, the legislators. You, the legislators. Are you the problem that you are not focused on one thing? Today you're asking for this. Tomorrow you're asking for this. Tomorrow you're demanding. Today, when you look at the papers, we are asking about the expectations from the national, the State of the Nation address today, and people are asking a lot more of the Uganda-Rwanda border status, and they're talking about, MPs.
Important.
Yes, you have seen what the MPs were demanding that should be addressed. The state of security in Kampala after those cameras. That seems to be our main focus. Yes, it is important, but that seems to be our main focus. So are we the problems with the people and the legislators? We are not consistent on our demands?
Parliament, like media, is a mirror. We come from you. We are the part of the political class. We are only a sample of the political class, and if we don't accept, I come from a background of conceding. I don't want to live in, Ugandans are living in denial. We have a stagnation, we are living in denial. I am saying, can we concede our maladies? Because if you want to be a doctor, you don't want to accept a diagnostic, then you have a problem. So let's come out of a denial, agree that we have some quagmire somewhere, but we can sort it out. If we don't do that, you are now talking of the Rwanda border. Who doesn't know that Rwanda is now ruling Congo? So there is that influence in the region. Sekedi is a president, yes, but he cannot appoint a prime minister until he listens from Kigali. So possibly there is some in the Great Lakes region, because I've discussed the geopolitics. In the Great Lakes region, there seem to be some power, some influence. And if you open in the Ugandan side, there may be a lot of issues on land matters, on businesses, who is controlling security, who is doing what. You saw the Kaiwara crisis, why possibly will never go to court because there are so many issues between the two countries. But there are also other issues. He raised the issue of the economy being in the foreign hand. I raised it earlier and he also added on it. If you have banks making money, telecoms making money, insurance is making money, you now have the road contractors, none is a Ugandan, and you're going into oil, largely foreign. Where do you expect the money to transform the country?
Honorable, you know what? People elect members of parliament, as we bring this to a close, members of parliament, and expect that, they're going to, debate matters that will affect them ultimately.
They're our representatives.
Exactly. And by and large, the public feels like you are failing them. Now, as we bring this to a wrap, because it looks like the issue is not the policies. We actually, the bloc has made a fan that, amazing policies are made in Uganda but implemented in Rwanda. Let's talk about, as we bring this to a close, quick solutions on how we can deal with the issue of not implementing, because the key problem stems from the lack of implementation of some of these things. Honorable, you can take it a short, 1 minute, and then we go to Professor as we wrap this up.
Uganda is overrepresented. We need to look more into service delivery. we need to look into specifics of industrialization instead of just thinking that it's just about having numbers. And that's why even when I talk about cities and town councils, I'm not talking about having so many political leaders there, because our public administration cost is just too much. That's why I said there was a point of mergers, restructuring, and the question of rationalization.
So for you, it's reducing on representation.
The government structure needs overhaul, and that can only be done through a national dialogue with the Constitutional Review Commission and changing so many laws, because these institutions have all been put in place by laws in the last 30 years. So to deal with a merger, it must be a national dialogue upstream, midstream must be it must be a national conference with the Constitutional Review Commission. Then you go to a law reform commission, and then the country can agree on the on agreed division on the Uganda we want. A shared division.
Thank you, Honorable Professor. And today, pretty much, even in the State of the Nation address, people say it's a lot of talk, a lot of plans, but zero implementation. What's for you? How can we solve this?
The problem of policy implementation, I think, among other reasons, could be a problem of lack of that policy space. That not very many Ugandans participate in policy making and policy implementation and policy evaluation. And we are, the space is not there. For example, let's use the NADS you talked about. NADS was said to have performed very poorly. We didn't participate in evaluating how to move forward at that level. All of a sudden, it was Operation Wealth Creation. If wealth creation fails, they will take another. The state, the executive will take another direction without involving the general population. So there is a lack of policy space to dialogue on these issues, and this is a question of governance.
Okay. All right. Interesting, interesting, interesting. Of course, we'll be getting into, your views on the same. We were asking, what do you expect the president to address this afternoon? The key issues. What do you think will stand out the most for you? And of course, right here, we were joined by Professor Mwambutsa Ndebesa. Thank you so much for making time. And also, Honorable Muchitale. You didn't know that, but either way, he is actually an economist here in the country. Thank you so much for coming on board. We'll be getting into your responses in just a few minutes, but let's take this short commercial break.
Play now, and for just 1,000 shillings, take home this week's 20 million shillings super jackpot. On MTN, simply dial *165*33#. For Airtel, dial *185*33#. Enter your 3 lucky numbers, followed by NTV. Enter your amount from 1,000 to 50,000 shillings.